Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Caribbean Talks. This 1-hour online show encourages dialogue and highlights topical issues that are important to people in the Caribbean. We're going to be talking about Caribbean music. We're going to be talking about Caribbean food, lifestyle, health, fashion, all with a Caribbean twist, showing our uniqueness and what it means to live and be in the Caribbean. I am Emmanuel Romeo Williams, and the pleasure is all mine to take you through today's episode, where we will be talking about climate change and what we are doing about it. Climate change and what it means for a small island developing stage such as ours is an interest of mine. So I am quite excited to talk about today's episode. Caribbean Talks seeks to highlight the interests of Caribbean people by connecting with the diaspora and the wider world through conversations. Allow me to acknowledge our sponsors, Caribbean Insights, an online platform that focuses on Caribbean lifestyle by providing information on current affairs, lifestyle, and political developments across the region. You can visit their website at www.mycaribbeaninsight.com. Our second sponsor, LRT Media and Business Solutions, empowering businesses and improving people's lives by providing transformative services to clients, primarily in the Global South. I am inviting you to join the live stream, share it with your friends and networks all over the Caribbean region. Follow us on Caribbean Insights Facebook page. Like, share, comment, and more importantly, get involved. Viewers, you are encouraged to put your questions and comments in the live, and we will try to address them throughout the show. So, without further delay, I will introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mr. Tyrell Gittens, Climate Trackers Caribbean. Tyrell is a conservationist, an environmentalist, geographer, and journalist from Trinidad and Tobago. Tyrell holds an undergraduate degree in geography and another in environment and natural resource management. He also has an MSc in biodiversity conservation and sustainable development from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. Tyrell has been a journalist since the age of 19 and has published articles in a number of local and regional news outlets. He is currently a project coordinator in the Cropper Foundation's Caribbean Environmental News Network and a freelance writer for the UE Today magazine. Tyrell is also a delegate at the upcoming 2022 Montreal Biodiversity Conference, or COP15, and will provide online coverage at the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, with the Climate Tracker team. Welcome, Tyrell. Let's jump right into it.
Hi, good afternoon, Avanal. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon.
Great. So how are you feeling?
I am feeling good, and I am feeling energized and encouraged that platforms like this incredible show sees the importance of bringing the topic of climate change closer to your audience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So what are your thoughts on climate change?
I think climate change is a very serious issue that we need to pay more attention to now, and not in the future tense as it is usually spoken about, in that context of it being something we need to look forward to in the future, because we are dealing with the consequences of climate change now. For example, we are seeing a lot of, intense tropical systems here in the Caribbean, like in the Pacific, or even like in the Indian Ocean, when tropical cyclones form. Here in Trinidad, we have the saying that God is a Trini, But that's because we usually, no, that's because we lie outside of the hurricane belt where, like, tropical storms develop and so forth. But alarmingly, in the last 5 years, we have had encounters with several storms, like Tropical Storm Brett and Don and even Bonnie recently. So I think in terms of climate change, it's something very serious that we need to start paying attention to. It's not something that's gonna happen. It's something that's happening to us.
Yes, so true. So yeah, and you're a journalist, so tell us what projects you have been doing currently, on climate change. Tell us what's happening with you.
Yeah, so I've had the honor of being involved with the Climate Tracker Network. Those
Congratulations.
who may not know what Climate Tracker is, it's basically like an umbrella organization. It's based around the world. So they focus on training, journalists to write about climate change and raising awareness about the issue of climate change. And part
Quite
of what they
important,
do,
yes.
is also train journalists to report on the United Nations Climate Change Conference, which occurs every year. So for the past several years, they have been sending reporters to the conference. So this year I've had the honor of being one of the online reporters. So there are 10 reporters that will be going physically to Egypt to cover the conference, and 10 reporters, covering the conference online. So I'm one of the online reporters, and over the past several weeks, we have had the most dynamic training sessions, learning from journalists all around the world, from all different kind of places, sharing their experience about all the different COP meetings they have covered in the past, and giving us insights on ways to cover the conference properly, accurately, not to get ourselves overwhelmed, because a lot of discussions would be happening at many different levels. But I think most importantly, what they reminded us, especially reporters like myself who come from the global south and small island developing states, to keep these stories that we write rooted in the community, because at the end of the day, we want people in our communities, whether it be in in the Caribbean or the Pacific or in Indonesia, places that are vulnerable to climate change. You want people in the communities to read about it, relate to it, and understand, why this issue is something that's getting so much of focus. So I would say, that's some of the work I've been doing in regards to like writing about climate change. I've also been writing a lot of climate change stories as a result of being involved with Climate Tracker. A few months ago, I had the opportunity of being part of an energy transition journalism fellowship, where they taught us to write about the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy in the Caribbean, and we produced a few articles as well around that theme.
Just to be invited into the room, I think is big. So I know you're going to do well. I know you're going to do your best. So I look forward to actually hearing about how that went in the future.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. So in the Caribbean, what do you think is the biggest issue for us with regard to climate change for us in the Caribbean?
So I think that's an incredible question. And I think, interestingly enough, the biggest issues that we need to focus on here in the Caribbean are going to be the topic of the day at COP27, which starts next week. And that's climate loss and damage, climate adaptation, and climate finance. So loss and damage, I always say the term is a bit, self-explanatory. It's the loss and damage that we will experience because of climate change. So how does climate change affect our day-to-day lives? Some people will lose sources of income, their livelihood. For people who depend on tourism, agriculture, sustainable fisheries, all these things climate change affect. And not only financially, even health-wise, people will, develop health issues. We have climate,
So interconnected. A lot of people
everything is interconnected. And adaptation is, how we will learn to live with climate change. As I just say, climate change is something that we are living with. And finance, of course, is, how we are going to finance those adaptation and loss and damage.
Do you think that we are financed sufficiently here in the Caribbean? Do you think that persons can do more, donors can do more from wherever, private, public? What are your comments on climate finance for us in the Caribbean?
I definitely think that some of the global power players could be doing more, and let me explain what I mean by that. So countries like us, typically referred to as global south countries, small islands, we emit very little carbon. Even Trinidad, which is relatively high in comparison to the rest of the Caribbean, because we use so much oil and natural gas. When we put it against countries like the US and countries in Europe and so forth, we produce very little emissions, yet we are the most impacted by climate change. We are the most vulnerable to climate change. So we have this dynamic where we aren't necessarily the aggressors, but we are in the front line of this battle. So I think that it's important for the aggressors, those large countries, those large companies, not only countries, companies that benefit from oil and natural gas, fossil fuels, activities which release a lot of emissions, such as carbon and methane and stuff, into the environment, should have some responsibility and play their part. For example, small island developing states like us, it's very difficult for us to access like climate finance on the global stage. And we even have in past COPs, countries making promises which they did not live up to. By 2020, we were supposed to be having some of the major economies in the world basically funding $100 billion a year of climate finance to global south countries, and that never materialized. So I definitely think more could be done for funding. As I always say, we live in a very vulnerable region. Our economy is still developing. So it's kind of like a juggling act. As I always say, people, we have to focus on survival, yet, we also have to focus on climate change. But at the same time, we are not necessarily the aggressors of climate change, and the aggressors of climate change aren't necessarily playing their part. So I think the more could be done to improve financing in the Caribbean.
You just mentioned some companies there here in Trinidad and Tobago that do contribute a lot to emissions, to carbon emissions. How can the public get them to, do more? Is it just speaking about it? Should we get the government to maybe pass laws? I know we have a green levy, but is that really enough? I know that they do pay something towards the amount of emissions that they would produce, but is that enough? Can more be done?
Yeah. So, a lot of the companies, I wouldn't name names per se, but a lot of the companies, they do have corporate social responsibility projects, and that's all well and fine. They invest in communities and so forth. Some of them invest in science, technology, and the research fields, the STEM fields. All of that is good. But we are currently in a dire state where I think we need to focus our direction on climate mitigation, which is reducing emissions. So as I always say, here in Trinidad and Tobago, we need to have a conversation about oil and natural gas. It isn't only a sustainable, source of energy, it's also not sustainable in terms of being like a reliant form of revenue generation. For example, we see with the Ukraine-Russia war, how oil prices have been going up and down.
Among other things,
particular markets have been experiencing shock after shock in relation to the war. So those companies, yes, they could be doing more on the ground level, but I think we also need to start looking away from oil and natural gas. I may not have necessarily called the company name, but you can get an idea of, to what I'm speaking about. So I just think we need to diversify our economy. That's a word that's been thrown around a lot nationally, but we truly need to diversify our economy and wean ourselves off of oil and natural gas. It's just not sustainable. We are using this to produce money, and it's the very money that we'll have to spend to finance loss and damage. So it's like this, it's this cycle. And I'm not saying that's something that could be done today. Maybe leaders of past and present should have started that process much earlier than us, trying to be at this place today. But it is something that still needs to be done, and hopefully, sooner rather than later. As I always say, we won't wake up today and stop using oil and gas. It would still have a function even as we transition to renewable energy, but we need to start doing something today more than paying this, issue lip service.
Yeah. And importantly, you did talk about us diversifying and trying to wean ourselves off oil and gas. I know I am seeing a lot of private entities that promote green technology, especially throughout the Caribbean region. Do you think that we are good at sharing technology from Caribbean, Jamaica, Barbados, all of us here in the region? Do you think we're good at it? Or?
My pause just raised, and the reason why I had that reaction is so one of my earlier climate tracker stories, I had the opportunity to interview Mr. Donald Barliusing. He's a renewable energy expert, and he founded the Southern Caribbean Cable Company. And over the past 20 years, they have been doing feasibility studies on developing this Caribbean network, this open market for renewable energy, whereas they would build a cable throughout the Caribbean. So for example, Guyana has a lot of hydropower potential in terms of generating energy from their waterfalls and so forth. So we could actually, through that cable, use some of Guyana's energy, or maybe Suriname, and then we have islands with a lot of volcanic activity, occurring more north in the Caribbean islands, such as Dominica and so forth. So they could, tap into their geothermal energy. And the thing about the Caribbean is so unique. We have solar power, we could have solar power, we could have geothermal energy, we could have hydropower, we could have ocean energy, like from the Atlantic Ocean. We could generate energy, wind energy. So we have so much potential. And the thing is, we have people actually doing research on how this could become a reality, this possibility could become a reality. So when you ask that question, I don't think we are doing enough right now because, we have the geographic barriers in terms of the islands are disconnected and so forth. We don't really have a market for energy right now. But if, for example, investors invest in a plan like that, where a company actually wants to build a regional network, I think those are things that we need to take, very seriously, because here we are always talking about what could be the solution, and the thing is, we have people who are actually trying to, work towards a solution. So when I was saying earlier on, for us to diversify our economy, it is estimated we spend at least $6 billion a year on just food imports. And the cable that I've been talking, that I just explained, the company estimate that it could cost about $1 billion US just between Trinidad and Guyana. So imagine if I'm not an economist, I'm not claiming to be an economist. I know how, all the technical, economics and stuff work like that, and maths, and I'm sure it have brilliant people who could also help with that aspect, because this is teamwork, climate change is teamwork. But I sure if we could diversify our economy, cut down our food import bills, I sure we could move around funds and start investing in projects like this to make that talk of diversifying the economy or energy use into reality. We need to realize these things are realistic.
Yeah, they are, and we are directly affected by them.
Yeah,
And
we on the front lines, and we
yeah,
don't have time. We don't have time to waste. We really don't have time to waste.
Your existence or our existence that is on the line.
So many people, I think, would be like, okay, why climate change? Because, we living in a world right now with a cost of living crisis and so forth. But if we have no will, we wouldn't even have a cost of living crisis.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah, but you really spoke a lot about the private sector. So compared to the public sector, it seems that, can I say that the private sector is really on the ball more so than, governments, individual governments, and the private sector has really taken this climate change issue and run with it in so many different ways, so many different avenues. Can we say that?
Um, So I would definitely say that as I said a short while ago, everybody needs to work together for climate change. And while, the government could be doing more to push Trinidad and Tobago along that path, they have been doing some stuff which they could be given some credit for. For example, we may have seen the development of the solar-powered CNG station in Couva. Last year, I know they would have launched, for now it's voluntary, platform where companies could report their carbon emissions for the year, and that could kind of help track carbon emissions. I know there's an electric vehicle policy in the works. We have seen things like the LED bulbs. But to me, more could always be done. And as I just told you, more investment could be done. So it's very encouraging that private companies are, taking up the mandate. But support as well is needed. I know Mr. Balio Singh would have said that TTX, what the company, has indicated support for the project, but there's always room for more. I may not know all the projects that are going on, but there is definitely room for more action, and definitely more room for our leaders to understand the need to diversify away from oil and natural gas. If there's anything that I would say our leaders need to focus more is having a serious discussion on that, and having the political will to make that transition, because it's being done in other Caribbean islands. For example, Barbados, they use solar power widely across the island, and there are actually like schemes in place where people would produce solar power in their homes, and the government would buy the excess from the grid and so forth. So it's being done right in our backyard. So it's time for us to, start thinking about these things and investing more. I think like having tax-free allowance, people being able to purchase electric vehicles and stuff with some tax exemptions and stuff is great. But we are moving slow. We need to be moving quick, because climate change isn't waiting for us.
All right, I want to move away from the technical bits before we close and pull out the environmentalist in you. I want to ask, is there a particular project, that you may have covered that really touched you, that was really impactful on your journey, your personal climate change journey?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's one project, but I would say it's a multitude of projects being done by a lot of NGOs, particularly in Trinidad. You would have asked about the private sector and the government, what they are doing, but I must give credit to the NGOs. And it's not just because I've been active volunteer in Trinidad and Tobago, but a lot of environmental NGOs are doing a lot of environmental work. For example, we have Nature, which is based in Tobago, and they are doing a lot of campaigns on poaching, illegal hunting, and wildlife protection and so forth like that. We have IAMovement. They do a lot of environmental work in terms of, rehabilitating quarries and helping people. They have this vetiver grass project, which they plant along river.
Our next speaker, I'll have him speak a little more on that.
Yes. And then we have the groups like Climate Tracker, and so we have a lot of groups like yours that are doing these webinars, to help inform people. So I think, and Mr. Balio Singh would have also founded the CZIT. I think it's the Carbon Zero Initiative of Trinidad and Tobago, and they do a lot of tree planting. For example, the moringa tree absorbs carbon emissions, if I am correct, 20 times more than other trees. So they actually have a project where they're encouraging groups and communities to plant moringa trees. So I think being able, and I've done a lot of stories on the work that NGOs are doing. Kudos to all the NGO groups in Trinidad and Tobago who are really doing their best to help people on the grassroots level. They are doing a lot of work, and you would have asked about the government and private sector. I would say confidently that NGOs are also carrying, a lot of the work that we need to be done, and investing more in the work that they are doing is something that
really good to hear.
governments and
That's
private
really good to
companies
hear.
should look into.
Yeah, and on that note, so with all of the help that we've been getting on climate change from all the different sectors, someone just asked that, is Trinidad and Tobago prepared for the shocks of climate change? Are we doing what needs to be done to get us there, or are we on the way to being prepared, in your humble opinion?
Oh, wow. In my humble opinion, I'm a pretty hopeful person, but I would use this example, right? We have seen the recent weather with, different tropical waves we have had in the last several weeks. And just the level of flooding we have, experienced. Now, flooding is something natural. As a geographer, flooding is natural. It has been here before us and probably after us. But that is where things like climate adaptation comes in. So if we know that certain communities are vulnerable to flooding, we should be sitting down and trying to discuss, okay, how could we help those those communities? Is it that we do more river dredgings? Is it that we widen rivers? Is it that we build proper drainage? Because, as a journalist, I've worked as a journalist, like on the ground reporting, and I've covered flooding in communities. And when you look at it, it's simply sometimes a issue of just drainage, like it don't have proper drains, and that's why floods are happening so quickly. So if something as simple as flooding is happening, and then we may have light weather events and the electricity across the entire country is knocked out, and we are not even talking about hurricanes. So if this is just a tropical wave, what will happen when a hurricane comes? So as much as I'd like to be hopeful, I would say we need to be doing more on our disaster preparedness in general here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Very important.
To be taken a little more seriously. Yes, our authorities, again, they do a good job, like the ODPM and so forth, in regards to responding to disasters, but it's more, what could we do before? Probably evacuating people, beefing up resources, like so for so when it comes to dealing with extreme weather events, I don't think we are prepared. We have a lot of people living along coastal communities, and if you take a drive to the north coast here in Trinidad, you would see just the extent of coastal erosion. I know there is some rehabilitation work being done on the southern coast to build seawalls and stuff like that. So we need to be seeing more of that to really be able to adapt to climate change, which is, again, climate adaptation, another major topic that they will be talking about at COP.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But Tyrell, I want to say thank you so much. You gave us so much information to think about, and even encourage us to get involved more so than we are now. There are a lot of unsung heroes that you would have mentioned in the NGO space working tirelessly on climate change. I do hope that your stories that you write inspire not only those in this region, but also abroad. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing to light some of these issues. Your words are very, very encouraging.
Thank you so much, and all the best on this incredible initiative. It's important, and we need more of this.
Yes, thank you, Tyrell.
Bye.
Bye. So now we would move on to our second speaker. For those of you just joining us, you are tuned into Caribbean Talks, a Caribbean-based online show that talks about issues we face within the region. Join the live, like, comment, and share. So our second speaker is Mr. Nikolai Emmanuel of the IAMovement, Trinidad and Tobago. Nikolai Emmanuel is an environmental science and sustainable technology specialist who currently works as the project manager for the IDB lab building on Vetiver. He is also responsible for the development and execution of several sustainable green technology programs with the IAMovement, including execution of training on the Vetiver system. So what's up, Nikolai? How are you this evening?
Hi, Emmanuel. Glad to be here with you all.
Yes, we are very happy to have you. So let's jump right in it. Tell us more about your organization, IAMovement, please.
Okay, so IAMovement is I'd like to say a relatively young organization comprised of a lot of young, passionate persons. And we work on a lot of climate-focused projects, environmental change-focused projects. And we do so in order to really try to advance that climate adaptation, climate mitigation mind frame within Trinidad and Tobago. More than just Trinidad and Tobago as well, we try to reach out regionally, understanding that we are a small island developing states, in order to really try to understand what synergies the NGOs from other regions and other territories might also have. So IAMovement, we may be based out of Trinidad and Tobago, but we do a lot of work with our partners all across the region, really trying to advance, benefits in battling climate change.
Right, good. I know that you guys just completed your first green infrastructure conference. Is it the first in Tobago? Or in Trinidad and Tobago, or is it the first for IAMovement?
It's the first in the Caribbean, actually. So
well, congratulations! Yes.
Thank you. So it was a really big conference, and it was something we were really proud to be able to get off the ground successfully.
Yes, you should be. Yes.
Thank you. It was the Caribbean's first green infrastructure conference. So it really focused heavily on different green technologies, specifically the Vetiver system, which I will get into a bit later in terms of explanation. Nice. But it really dove into how we could leverage particular green technologies and nature-based solutions, as well as the different avenues of climate financing that are available throughout the region, throughout the Caribbean. So it really gave us a chance to speak with some like-minded individuals, different passionate persons, about some of the actions and some of the steps that we can be taking, some of the technologies that we can utilize as mitigation tools, as adaptation tools to really prepare for the challenges that we know are coming, and really try to understand that unique perspective from each island, right? To see what inputs they may have, so that we can really work together, because more input is always better than less, right? So for us, it is very valuable to offer all of these positive, good things that we say we are doing to really try to make it Caribbean based, much like this talk show, Caribbean Talks, which I assure is, targeting a lot more persons than just those in Trinidad and Tobago. It's really focusing on what we could do as a region together.
Yes, technology is really important for climate change mitigation, for climate change adaptation. Is there any particular technology that you are proud of or impressed about, the results that you would see from it?
Well, I can speak really clearly on just this green technology, this nature-based solution called the Vetiver system. So it's kind of, so to say, my bread and butter. For the past couple of years now, we've done, I can't even count how many public discussions, public engagements, workshops with persons really trying to explain the Vetiver system. It's a green engineering technology, a nature-based solution that utilizes a particular species of grass called vetiver grass, which has the property of its roots. It grows straight down up to 10 feet deep within the first 2 years.
Wow.
Right, and there's instances where the roots can get up to 3 meters deep, right, in good soil conditions. So utilizing this grass, so notice I'm not saying the grass is the technology, but utilizing this grass, we could learn of a particular system, called the vetiver system, which defines the best practices and the best use for this particular clump of grass to achieve certain positive benefits. So you can imagine with all that good root growth, it's going to be really good for land stabilization. But what is really important in understanding about vetiver grass is that it's certified non-invasive. So the vetiver system utilizes plants installed in a hedgerow, which for all intents and purposes, I see a lovely background there, would be a series of lines.
Yes.
That follow the contour. If it's on a slope, it follows the contour of the hill. So you really try to have the plants installed at the flattest level possible to allow great dispersal of water and more infiltration. That slows down runoff that's coming from our hillsides and entering our rivers, causing more sedimentation. A lot of that outflow gets into the sea and it hambugs fish stocks. Tyrell would have recently spoken as well about all the immense rain that we would have gotten. A lot of siltation would have clogged many drainage pathways and resulted in that. So the vetiver system is one of these technologies that we've seen that could be life-changing in the Caribbean in terms of our battle for climate adaptation. It's a very effective tool, given its characteristics. You could utilize it for far more than just land stabilization. The leaves and the roots could be utilized in handicraft production. So a part of the model that we undertake when we're doing these community trainings actually involves really going down to the community level and finding what different individuals are good at. So some persons might actually have issues with slippage, and they would definitely need the vetiver system on their property, in which case we would offer these workshops and really go in depth to allow persons to understand all the various characteristics of vetiver grass, from its uses in coastal protection to riverbank stabilization, phytoremediation of heavy metals, if that is an issue for them, use in agriculture, handicraft for improvement of your livelihood and income generation. So we really tried to make a broad application of this one vetiver system technology, because we saw how beneficial it could be in all these territories. So as to not be selfish, that's why we really like to share the knowledge and come on platforms like this to make more and more, as much people aware of this very simple adaptation tool that they could make use of, especially in this environment where we are 100% sure that we have these negative impacts going to be coming.
Yeah, and it's really important that our climate change projects, like they are cross-cutting, that they not only do one thing, but do 2, 3, 4, 10 things.
Yes.
And I really like your explanation on the system, because it really speaks to sustainability, and it's initiatives like this that would help us protect our generations to come.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that these solutions, they often target more than one facet, right, of an issue. So the vetiver grass, as we say, it's useful for many things, and in multiple cases, we find that each person that has used it, or in each case that we've had to use it, there has been more than one particular use for it. So, for example, some families may be able to use it for land stabilization, but they found that because of how they installed it, and having learned, let's say, the handicraft component, they now have a supply of raw materials to continue making crafts, right? So literally right outside their home, they now have feedstock for income, right? You have persons who were more interested in planting a nursery. And I always like to make the comment to persons, so even if you have no slippage, you have zero interest in creating handicrafts, vetiver grass is what's known as a C4 plant, a carbon 4 plant. So it captures more carbon than the average plant. So even if you're just looking to do something positive for the environment, you can plant a vetiver grass and it will grow into a nice, beautiful clump. But one thing I really want to make clear for persons in terms of the system is that you have to be, because it's non-invasive, it's a certified non-invasive plant, that is also why persons are able to leverage sales of the plant, because it's very labor intensive to harvest and propagate the plant. But it's because of the same reason as well, when it's installed in that hedgerow, it doesn't run. So it's not going to be like a bamboo or one of those cane grasses that you planted here and then it's over there by next year. Right? When it's planted in its system, it's going to remain there and continue performing that function.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can encourage persons to help with the climate change fight by just planting grass and forgetting about it.
Just planting some grass. You could the leaves of the grass as well. In healthy conditions, they could grow up to 2 meters tall, right? You could trim them once they're adult to any height that you so desire. So it's really good for privacy as well, or as a land barrier, as a boundary. So it offers a physical barrier for certain things. And we really try to, again, when we're engaging persons, we try to see what is the best use that you could have for this vetiver system. How best can you leverage it? What are all the uses you could use from it? So you might need it in the back of your house to dry up a very wet area, let's say, right? Let's say you have let's say old septic tank, some areas still have latrine systems, and you have that, you know, it has a high organic content. It's gonna have an area of your land very sappy. So if you install the vetiver grass right there, you're gonna get multiple functions. It's gonna remove all the coliforms from the soil. It's gonna make it safe to move there. It's gonna dry up the soil. And then you're gonna have these lush, healthy leaves that you could use to produce handicrafts. So really trying to stack on those benefits.
Okay, does it grow naturally in Trinidad and Tobago? Is it a grass that we see in the wild, you know, for lack of a better
so actually a lot of people have seen vetiver grass, but don't know what it is, right? Sadly.
I'd be guilty of that. I wouldn't know exactly what it is I'm looking at.
So along some of our highways, vetiver is really important to understand that vetiver is somewhat of a lost technology. We had vetiver grass in Trinidad for hundreds of years. It came across to Trinidad during the Indian migration as well. Because it's very, very important. It's a very important plant in Hindu and Indian culture, right? Where it's used in some of their ceremonies. So we've had the plant for hundreds of years, but the understanding and the knowledge of the importance of the plant was lost with previous generations. So with the ability of persons to easily use spray cans and weedicides and herbicides on the property, or when bricks and building material was very cheap, right? Persons would not have had a need to utilize vetiver grass instead of a wall. So a lot of that technology for nature-based solutions, and it's the same for technologies outside of vetiver grass. A lot of that old knowledge of those nature-based solutions, that is what we're really trying to get back to now in order to fight that climate change fight. Really trying to understand how we can work with the environment instead of taking from the environment, creating a different structure and placing it in that natural system, right? The vetiver system and understanding these things really have to do with working together with the environment, using things from the environment naturally to really see how we could improve that situation for ourselves, right? How can we utilize nature now to protect ourselves from what we know is going to be coming, which are those heavier rains, greater instances of landslide, more drought, and the vetiver system is great for all of these.
Okay, but I mean, I know it has been said many times that, you know, our forefathers really understood nature, really knew how to work with it for their benefit as well as, you know, the benefit of nature, you know, and we truly, in some respects, have lost that knowledge. And with what's happening with climate change, it's forcing us to go back. You know, you would have mentioned that the vetiver systems can also be used for handicraft. And I find it very interesting because right now here in Tobago, the Department of Community Development is actually doing a revival of the handicraft, the traditional handicraft here. So the vetiver grass, is it the entire leaf, root, the entire can be used for handicraft? What sort of...
So amazingly, the entirety of the plant can be used for handicraft, which is often a great community byproduct. So when we do these trainings in different communities on the vetiver system, showing them how to install, identify areas that may have an issue, we always make sure to conduct some form of handicraft training that gives these persons skills, right? You could utilize the leaves of the plants. They can be plaited into a rope. And then after you plait it into a rope, you could utilize it to make, I want to say almost anything, because I've seen people make a crazy amount of things. We've seen people make decorative boats, little bowls, placemats.
Please. Yes.
There's a hat. We've seen recently at the conference, we had a huge display from what was born out of a same community program. It's a brand called House of Vetiver. They had a wonderful display up at the Caribbean Green Infrastructure Conference, where they displayed a lot of stuff produced from various community members across Trinidad. So some persons in Lopino. So we attend different markets as well throughout the year to try to get these community persons goods as well sold, so that we don't only leave. We don't want it to be that we go into a community, we just do something and then we leave. It's really about empowering and giving persons in a community the ability to leverage these new things that they've learned, right? So where they know, okay, well, I know how to make handicraft. We were talking about the different things you can make from it. You could plait it into rope, make chairs, baskets. The roots could be dug up and harvested. The roots, the oil from the root actually, a lot of people utilize vetiver every day, but they don't really realize it. The oil from vetiver grass is in about 80% of all perfumes worldwide. Okay. It has a beautiful smell, a beautiful fragrance, and it also carries other fragrance as well. It allows the fragrance to stay. So it's a main ingredient in a lot of perfumes, right? So long ago, people actually just used to dry the roots and use it to keep away insects from their cupboards, utilize it in their wardrobes, which gave vetiver a lot of different names throughout the island. So in some regions, they call it kush grass. So you might find they selling kush roots, bedding grass. We've heard in Maruga, they actually used to make beds and mattresses with it decades ago.
Also edible? Is it also edible? Can you make teas with it?
We've had our handicraft trainer. She's actually made vetiver wine, and it's delicious.
Wow, that's very impressive.
Delicious. Yeah,
and the perfume industry, that's a $1 billion industry right there.
Yeah. So in Haiti, the oil is actually really is sold as one of their major exports, right? Yeah. So it's we try to show persons how best they could utilize the entire plant. And then we also offer some green business training classes as well to really allow them to get the opportunity to produce and feel empowered by the knowledge that they have, so that is not lost again, right? We want persons to be encouraged and be excited about continuing to tell people about these new technologies that they've learned about, If we teach you about something today, but it doesn't really have any value to you, the chances of you taking it and telling someone else about it are very low. But if it's something that changes your life and saves you money, gives you opportunity to do a host of other things, it might be something you're more readily willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a question from Facebook asking if that grass can also be used for screw pine craft. Have you ever heard about the screw pine craft?
I have heard of screw pine craft, yes. So we actually trying to figure out now how best we could incorporate screw pine and vetiver grass together. Because when we saw the screw pine, again, it's a great handicraft tool. And yeah, it would look beautiful with some vetiver. But yeah, it's likely you could use the vetiver to wrap it. But we do have some crafters in Tobago who are more skilled with the screw pine. We're not so knowledgeable on the screw pine craft, but we do have them working to try to figure out how best, and hopefully it might fall into the work that Tobago on a broader scale is doing to revitalize handicraft as a niche market. To really figure out how best we could use all these things, because I don't believe screw pine has, and forgive me if I don't know if I'm wrong, but I don't believe screw pine has much use outside of handicraft. So if you could pair it with something that has, as we spoke about, Avenel, other uses, other beneficial uses, then that too might work to, reinvigorate some people around craft on a broader sense in Tobago, which would be a good thing.
I can definitely put you on to people who know and understand everything about screw pine if the IAMovement is interested, but we can
always interested in talking and learning and sharing knowledge with persons.
We have some tutors here that eat, sleep, think, breathe screw pine.
Screw pine? So, that's great.
Definitely, they process it themselves from beginning to end. So, that's definitely something.
That would be great to get in contact with them, because we had some ideas just seeing the screw pine and really trying to understand how that could work together. Yeah. And I mean, just to bring it back for the persons in the audience, all of this really would do, works well towards climate change as well. It gives persons an opportunity to utilize natural materials to create products for sale, right? Completely natural. So if you could utilize, for instance, in our craft making, through the brand that we've created, it's called House of Vetiver. And what we aim to do is all the persons that we've trained, the normal material that we would usually use to sew the material together is a regular thread, a regular nylon thread. But again, that's not sustainable, right? We want to go all green. So what we've done is we worked again with some community persons to really try to create a fiber from banana skins to see if that would work as a material that we could use to sew them together. And it worked. So in doing that, we finally got 100% carbon negative product that you could sell. So if you could incorporate screw pine into that, it's something that gives persons an opportunity to create something that is labor intensive that could be sold for a respectable value in a environment such as Tobago, which is very heavily dependent on tourism, and you have that series of persons coming. So just look at that, something as simple as screw pine and vetiver grass could really contribute towards ecotourism and development in that particular area for Tobago. Just these two little grasses and some handicraft.
Yeah. We have one more question from Facebook asking if we've ever heard about the roots being used as a pest treatment, like as a pesticide. No?
No, so you can't directly use it as a pesticide, I would say. Again, because it's an oil that's in the roots, it's very difficult and very, very expensive to extract. So you could, in theory, buy some vetiver oil and dilute it with water and a surfactant and spray it on your stuff. Because we have found that certain insects do stay away from the smell because of that fragrance. Again, that's why it was used in your cupboards and to keep away moths and those small insects. But as a broad spectrum insecticide, we don't have any, we don't have experience in creating that, but it would be it would be too costly to be feasible, I would say.
Yes, well, I know that the IAMovement is very busy. We just heard Tyrell sing praises for NGOs such as yourself. So what's next for the IAMovement? Do you have any projects in the pipelines, a second conference perhaps?
We have a lot of projects in the pipeline. I'm going to try my best to run through a couple of the ones that we have right now. So in Trinidad, we're still working on the MeWe Green project, which aims to educate, inspire, and empower persons. That has to do with taking the vetiver system nationwide across 8 different territories. We're working with the ECA CBF project on a more Caribbean regional project that has to do with ridge to reef protection in Tobago, St. Lucia, Dominica, and Antigua. We're working as well with the United Nations Democracy Fund, UNDF, to advance climate democracy in Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname as well. We also have the Building on Vetiver project, which is coming to an end in December. And hopefully, well, if you permit me to share a bit of good news, we were actually selected for a new IDB project that's going to kick off in 2023. That has to do with, that's very focused on circular economics and recycling. And as I said, the BOV project is aiming to close off this year. We also have some partnerships with those climate financiers you would have spoken about previously. One of them is CRIF. They are also working with us to implement the vetiver system in 2 communities in Trinidad and conduct a number of trainings as well. So we're quite busy, and we're looking forward to continuing to do more. You know, it's a very exciting time. And I'm just grateful to be a part of it. And yeah, so thanks for having me on to share a bit of what we're doing.
So lastly, before we wrap up, just tell us what climate democracy is about that you just mentioned, one of your projects in the pipelines. Just tell us quickly, what is climate diplomacy? So
really quickly, climate democracy is more of an idea. It's more of something to understand. You need to understand that democracies, they face certain perceived challenges. You might have short-term bias in decision making, difficulty in policy capture, several weak accountability measures. So advancing climate democracy really is a model, and you have to look at it as the whole thing, the advancement of climate democracy. So it's how we can advance adaptation measures, mitigation measures in a democratic environment. So it really looks at what we need to do to mitigate climate change and build more resilience in cities and regions through building more robust climate policy, through trying to get more representative parliaments, doing things which might hold governments more accountable. So for example, in that Advancing Climate Democracy project, which I spoke about, is our aim to do climate talks on education with a lot of young persons so that they're educated about what they need to hold governments accountable to. And we're also developing an app that in the first version is going to allow persons to access an education library, as well as be able to tag slippage and instances of erosion, right? So we have a database that could be shared with governments in these countries so that they can be held accountable. So no one will be able to say, well, we didn't know there was a landslide on Lady Young, or there was a landslide there. You would have now a series of areas tagged in order to showcase, okay, we do have interest from the public and a call for things to change. So it's really giving persons a bit of that power, giving the public a bit of that power to make choice and really influence change. Quickly, that's all I could say about it.
No, but that's accountability is very important for climate change. Extremely important. But Nikolai, we're going to have to leave it here. I want to thank you so much for all that you have said. Your organization, IAMovement, is very busy, so I know we will be hearing more about your activities in the future. Yes. So I hope we can invite you once more to speak about the other activities that you are currently implementing, doing, fighting for, etc.
Of course, happy to join you guys anytime.
Yes, and thank you again.
Thank you so much.